Welcome. We'll wait for a few more minutes. We have some people coming in, and we'll wait for them to get seated. We are going to be taking some audience questions, and we have a student, Winter, with index cards and pencils. So if you raise your hand, she will find you, and you can write a question down on an index card. And we may not be able to answer all of the questions from you. We have several prepared questions. But just raise your hand if you'd like a card, and we will get an index card to you. Okay, well, thank you so much for coming tonight. This is our first candidate forum, sponsored by the Iowa County Elections Education Team, or group. We haven't quite decided our name. We are formerly the Iowa County Fair Maps Team, and I am not Myra Enlow, who was going to be the moderator. She was unable to make it tonight. And so I am Claudia Luz, and I am your host for this evening, or the moderator. And the purpose of this forum is to provide education to our community about the role of the sheriff and have an opportunity to meet the candidates and learn more about them and how they approach their jobs so we can be informed voters in November. And this is a very important election. We all know that public safety is terribly important, and one of these two people are going to be the top law enforcement officer in our county. And to begin the night, we are going to start with our current sheriff, Sheriff Mitchek. He is the current sheriff, and he can tell us a little bit about what the sheriff does in the county, how far the jurisdiction runs. So if Sheriff Mitchek would please come up. We have a live mic for you. You guys can have a seat. Relax. Come on up. Just like the Oscars. There you go.
Okay. Well, good evening, and welcome to the Dodgeville High School in this fabulous auditorium. I have to admit, this is the first time I've ever been in this auditorium, and this is a fantastic facility. Very, very nice. Anybody that's here in the Dodgeville School District and putting their tax money toward the Dodgeville School District, you have really done a nice job, and you should be commended for such a nice building and auditorium. Well, tonight I can tell you that it's a wonderful facility, and it's a facility we'll be proud of for a long, long time, because what we did was the best job we could with the funding we had, not going extravagant, but making sure it was adequate for what we had for planning purposes 10, hopefully 20, 30, 40 years down the road. We know that this building will last. It was a good quality project, and we know it'll last for a long time. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I know I really kind of went round and round there, but like I said, the sheriff has to be one of those people that's flexible, almost on an hourly basis. You've got to be that person that can jump up from the desk, go out, help at a traffic crash, go to an unfortunate situation like a fatality, and then notify family members of the deceased person's situation. There's very tough things that you have to do, but then there's also very rewarding things that you have to do as a sheriff. Something that I've been proud to be a part of is the DARE program. As a DARE instructor in a classroom, I was able to help kids in the 4th grade, 5th grade come up with ideas of why and how they could stop from getting involved in drugs, alcohol, even smoking. And sometimes I caught hell from parents because they would come to me and say, you know what, thanks to you, my kids are coming home and telling me I gotta stop smoking. Doggone it, this is a really bad habit I've had for a lot of years. But I'd smile at them and go, you know what, it's working then, isn't it? So that's the really cool stuff that you can be involved in. And sure, as a sheriff, you might not teach the DARE program, but it might be an important component of your agency. So there's all kinds of good programs that we're doing in the jail Today, we've done the best we could with our old facility. The new one allows us to do a lot more. So we're hoping that we can make it a better environment. It's a safer environment for our staff and the inmates, but we hope to make it a better environment for rehabilitation for some of our inmates that are going to be coming back to the community at some point. We've got to try to figure out what can we do to help reduce that recidivism that's continually happening with some of these people. So the sheriff does a lot of different things.
Thank you so much for all your years of service. Amazing. Thank you. You did it. Okay. All right. We're going to have Winter or Nick is going to be giving, let me just tell you the process tonight. So our group wrote a bunch of questions, and then we're going to also take audience questions, and we have a student that will be timing you, because we're going to alternate. I'll first ask Michael Peterson a question, because he, by a coin toss, was determined to get the first question, and then Kim Allen will have her 2 minutes, and we'll go 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes. And I will, at the end, you guys will have a closing 2 minutes to just make your closing statements. And I'll open with a little bio on both of you. I'll start with Michael, since you are going to be the first one to answer a question. So let me introduce Michael Peterson. He's a lifelong resident of Dodgeville, attended Dodgeville School District, Southwest Tech, and National Command and Staff College. He has been with the Iowa County Sheriff's Office for over 18 years, full-time working in corrections, emergency dispatch, patrol, court security. In his current role as the Iowa County Jail Administrator, he supervises the 9/11 911 Center and jail. He's the father of two who both attend school in the Dodgeville School District. His wife, Melissa, is Iowa County Treatment Court Coordinator. Michael is on the Board of Directors for the Dodgeville Chamber of Commerce, co-chair of Iowa County Substance Misuse Prevention Committee, member of the Iowa County Treatment Court Team, Iowa County Opioid Task Force, and involved in communities to better our mental health system. Kim Allen is a 16-year law enforcement veteran, recently promoted to Lieutenant of Police at the City of Madison Police Department, where she has worked for 11 years. Kim has worked in small towns, rural areas, and large cities. She has previously served as a patrol officer, deputy sheriff, neighborhood officer, field training officer, patrol sergeant, internal affairs sergeant. Kim lives on a rural property in the town of Ridgeway with her husband, Adrian, a 17-year law enforcement veteran and owner of Critical Impact Group, LLC. They have 2 children who attend the Barneveld School District. Kim is an Iowa County Board Supervisor and received her master's degree in criminal justice from UW-Platteville. So those are our candidates. So now we'll start with our first question, which I will direct to Michael Peterson. What are and we don't have our timer. Before we start, is Nick or Winter in the house?
Yeah, we're right here. We're timing from back. Do you want them closer?
You might want to be down here so that we
so
can.
she can see it.
I'm sorry about this. We didn't have a rehearsal. That's okay. You're doing it fine. So they're going to give us a 1-minute warning, a 30-second warning, and then a 15-second warning, and then they're going to go at 0. Okay? All right. And you got yes, you're all set. Wonderful. So start after I finish the question. What are the top 3 law enforcement issues affecting Iowa County, and how will you address them?
The top 3 issues, number 1 is recruitment. We don't have the excitement like when I first got into law enforcement for people to get into law enforcement. When I first started, we'd have maybe 200 applications. Right now, you're lucky if you get 6, 7, 8 applications. We're really fortunate right now. We've switched some of our hiring process, that we have a steady roll of applications coming in. Number 2 is our mental health system. Our mental health system is broke. We just up to recently had 0 emergency mental health providers in Iowa County. That's tragic, especially when you have all the events going on in our county. And number two is substance abuse. When you look at a lot of your crime rates, it's usually related to substance abuse and mental health. We have to continue to work with these people to get these resources in our county, to better our county, to be able to stop the crime or the criminal activity that is taking place.
Excellent, thanks. Kim?
All right, so I agree that staffing is an issue. Certainly on the county board, we heard about that. Our current staff is on 12-hour shifts. That's unsustainable. We need to have them healthy and ready to go for when they're coming to your home to deal with a crisis. So definitely want staffing to be handled and something going forward. We want to have good recruitment, lots of applications, so we can choose the very best to be serving us in our most vulnerable times. And certainly we've taken some steps. I saw some billboards that went up. We need to be even more proactive, getting out into the communities. Even when I'm going door to door, I'm finding people that are like, I had no idea you were hiring. I had no idea. And so I'm hopefully getting a couple more applications in the barrel, but being more proactive should be helpful. Second thing is drugs in this county. I'm hearing that from the outer communities loud and clear. Our role as a county sheriff's office is to support them and help them protect their communities. And they're very worried, especially in the river areas and some from Platteville as well. We'd really like to see our drug task force be fully staffed and our K-9 units be back out there. The third thing I would say is transparency and helping our community understand exactly what our sheriff's office does. Tonight is a great step in that direction. I think that's helpful, but I think for legitimacy, I think Iowa County really needs to hear what we're doing and how we're using your taxpayer dollars to support and defend it.
Excellent, thank you. All right, next question, and you get 2 minutes total each, and you can use as much or not, whatever you choose. And now Kim will start with this question. Considering the Sheriff's Department represents a large portion of the county budget, over $4 million, what experience do you have that makes you qualified to manage this office and the department's large budget?
Absolutely. So right now I'm on the Public Safety Committee with the county board, so we actually work with the Sheriff's Office to help them understand and help our board, more importantly, understand what the priorities are going to be going forward and how it's being spent. I'm also on the Long Range Planning Committee that looks forward 5 years to try to say these are the big capital things that we're looking out that we want to see for the Sheriff's Office or other departments. So those have been great experiences for me to help me understand how our county does a great job of forming their budget and then prioritizing what's important. I also have been the treasurer for the Wisconsin Association of Women Police for over 4 years now. So I handle a lot of money for that organization and understand how you have to be resourceful and careful with those funds. It's just a joy to be a part of that organization to provide scholarships for women interested in this kind of work. And it's just, I'm very lucky to have gotten all that experience. So those have been good things to have in my hat going into this office.
And Michael.
Right now I'm in our second budget cycle since I've been jail administrator. We've been very fortunate with our budget. Every year we go under our budget, always giving back money to the county. This year we're sitting right between roughly 2%, 3% increase to our budget, which is pretty good for going into a new building. Also in this budget, right now we're looking at different streams of revenue that we are bringing in that we will be able to possibly add another correctional position. Halfway through the year of 2023, looking at another dispatcher position, and then doing some restructuring within the office.
Thank you. And then Michael, this is the next question. Well, and we've already heard about this. We've heard from the current sheriff there's a shortage of staff. So what is your strategy to attract and retain the best employees?
Right now, we are using different business cards with QR codes that worked out very well for us. We have open enrollment or open recruitment going on. So if we have someone that we want to hire or that we come across someone or someone that's not happy at their current agency that want to go to a different agency, we have that open recruitment going on. If we have a position open, then we can move forth with all the applicants that we have sitting within our bank at that time. Like Ms. Allen said, we have the billboard up and running right now. We've done a recruitment video. And the best is our team, investing in our team and making them go out and want to recruit people because they like working for the Iowa County Sheriff's Office.
Excellent. And how would you recruit and retain the best employees?
So again, being more proactive I think is key. It doesn't hurt if you have a female sheriff. A lot of folks looking to get into law enforcement like to see that. A lot of women like to see something of themselves in the upper administration of the department they're going to join. So having a female sheriff, as easy as that is, sometimes really helps open some doors to 50% more talent that you could be having at your organization. So, it's great. Yesterday was National Police Women's Day. I'd love to see a much bigger post from Iowa County Sheriff's Office and see a lot more ladies signing up. I've met some very incredible women in this community that I know would have had this path had they seen maybe more of themselves in that administration. I think it would be a good strategy as well to go after people that are retired or close to retirement. That's a strategy that the Custer County Sheriff's Office had out in South Dakota. They didn't pay real well, but they were a beautiful place, which Iowa County definitely is. We attracted a lot of folks that didn't want to have this super high volume that they saw like in places in Milwaukee County or Dane County, finish out their last couple of years in the state retirement system there. So I think that could be another good strategy for us here.
Excellent. Oh,
To be fair with you.
yes.
Yeah.
We're doing 2 minutes. We're doing 2 minutes. He gets 2 minutes and she gets 2 minutes. We haven't been cutting anybody short.
No,
Okay.
I just
I know, he was making sure that Kim wasn't being cut short.
Yep.
Got it.
It goes
Okay.
fast.
This is our first run,
No, that's fine.
but we're doing okay. Okay, now we're going to talk about leadership style, and we'll start with Kim. Just tell us about your leadership style.
So my leadership style is very much just lead by example. I like to do things with my teams to build that trust and respect and to show them that I am, the supervisor that has already mastered what I'm trying to teach them. So I think that's very important for them to see that in their supervisor and have that trust in you, that if you show up on the scene that you have those qualifications, those strategies ready to go. The other thing that I just like to develop people beneath me. I think it's really important to get to know people and find their talents and make sure that those talents are, benefiting our county to the fullest. When people see you out there doing it, that's one thing, but when they finally get to that point where they're doing it, there could be no prouder moment. I see that a lot in my role as a firearms instructor right now, especially with women officers, people that were terrified to even hold a gun, and to have them go out and be successful and to see them being promoted. As you saw yesterday, Madison Police had a huge thing talking about an entire shift of women that was together, and to field train a couple of those ladies felt really, really good.
And Michael, tell us about your leadership style.
The leadership style is empowering our team. I want to empower our team. I want them to be the best that they can be. I think everybody wants to see the best in any person. I got to where I am today by someone believing into me. I like to believe in my team, but I also like to be there for them, whether it's 2 o'clock in the morning or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. If there's something going on, I'm going in with my team. They're not going alone. I want to make sure that they develop, like Kim said, to be the best that they can be.
Excellent, thank you. All right, now, what ongoing training would you like to see for employees of the Sheriff's Department? We'll start with you, Michael.
Ongoing training, we're developing right now a monthly training guide. So both our jail and our patrol will have one training a month, and it'll be countywide. All law enforcement in the county will be invited to that training, and we would like to see them attend. Just basically because a lot of times they're our backup in the rural areas. Some of that training is going to be from anything from active shooter to medical training for patrol or the jail, disturbances in the jail, disturbances out on patrol, and then we'd like to go even further, domestic training for domestic abuse victims, substance abuse, and then most importantly also mental health training.
Kim, what kind of ongoing training would you like to see for the employees of the Sheriff's Department?
So I think that the Sheriff's Office has so many different roles that I think you would want to tailor it to what their job is. I think that correctional staff would benefit from inmate management type trainings, where a lot of that is moving toward evidence-based and more contact with the inmates and making sure that the inmates are staying busier so that there isn't more bad things happening. I think for your patrol staff, a lot of stuff is moving toward evidence-based policing, where we're looking at what is actually working, how often do we need to drive through Avoca, or how often do we need to be in a city where we're actually making a difference. How did these community partnerships work out? The court system is a great example. Our drug treatment court, evaluating the efficacy of that. Could we do it just a little bit different and get a lot better outcomes? So stuff like that, I think would be great going forward to have our staff tapping into stuff, which would affect them directly in their positions.
Okay. All right, now we're going to move into the section, that was administration and operations. Now we're going into like more public safety issues. So Kim, we'll start with you. The tragic school shootings around the country have parents, school districts, and law enforcement agencies looking for ways to ensure their schools are always safe. What plans do you have for school safety, and what policies would you like to see enacted and why? And we'll start with you, Kim.
All right. So the Avoca chief shared with me that they were looking at holding a kind of a joint training together with the Barneveld School to try to do an active shooter. And then, of course, COVID crashed down on us and put it off, I don't know how many years now. I would definitely, as a sheriff, see that as a priority to make sure that that happened. You need to have your officers aware of the floor plans, what could be to their advantage, what couldn't, what could be used against them. Our schools here, Dodgeville did a great upgrade to have their central entrance and make this building more secure. Barneveld similarly has it all in one building now. So we've taken some great steps. I think that our main strategy has to be communication and working together. And I want to see each school district communicating that to me. I don't want to be putting that upon the school districts. I want them to communicate like, hey, in this district, we'd really like to see this. Obviously, we will help inform them with the knowledge that we have as a police agency or a law enforcement agency. But we're hearing things like 80 to 90% of the time, people say something before one of these shootings happens. And so see something, say something is a word that goes around a lot. So if we can get our communities strong, which I believe our communities are very strong here, and we have not had these issues because of that. If we can have that communication occur where people are like, yep, you know what, this is not going well, let's have the sheriff's office take a look, or let's bring some community partners and the sheriff's office. That's the best outcome in my mind, as the community to wrap around those people before they get to the point where they're hurting people.
Okay, and Michael.
First and foremost, I want to make sure that our teams across the county, whether it's fire, EMS, and police, are prepared. They'll be the proper tools if a tragic event was to happen like that. Ongoing training with our teams, not just law enforcement, but fire and EMS. One thing that we are working on in the county right now that we're in the very beginning stages is a mental health program that is computerized. It's like a telehealth. Right now it's in the mid-70s accuracy rate for predicting suicide or a possible threat for an active shooter. As we explore this program, we are bringing in stakeholders from our county, our mental health system, hospitals, and the schools to see if this is something that we can utilize for these children. Some of the schools that have already implemented this, or the counties that have implemented this down south, have found within their student body that maybe out of 400 that there's 8 that could possibly become an active shooter or possibly shoot themselves. So if we can get something like this up and running when we are so low on emergency mental health services right now, I think that will help us tremendously. Working with the schools, making sure that the schools are prepared, what are they going to do, etc. But now with the technology in our dispatch center, we have multiple televisions that we are able to pull up camera systems. So we're working with some of the schools on getting those cameras to be able to put up in our dispatch center to help monitor if they would like, and or if there is an incident that we can be better prepared to see what is happening to guide our resources in.
And I have just a follow-up, and just in Uvalde, there was such a problem with the command, the line of command, and it just, for an hour and whatever it was, nobody knew who was in command. How would you avoid that? Is there a strategy, if a tragedy like that were to ever occur, is there a plan that there's not an hour and some minutes that nobody is taking control?
If you want to call it a plan, it comes down to training. It just can't happen. When there's an active shooter situation, whoever's first on scene needs to go in and neutralize that threat. We're not going to sit in the hallways for an hour. It needs to happen immediately. Whether it's the sheriff that's on scene first with the police chief, you're going in.
And Kim?
So I think what I saw when I saw that play out was that that chief had that kind of a ceremonial position. I don't think that he ever thought I'd be the one going into school, and that's why he didn't have a radio on him. I think it happens when you get too much distance from the road and you don't understand the realities of your community. That organization was very well liked before that happened, and then to have that complete failure, in my opinion, it's unconscionable. I think each individual law enforcement officer has to make their decision as to what they would do. Some of them say, hey, wait for 2 people to get there so you at least have somebody to cover you. In my heart, I'm going in. I guess there's kids dying in there. I'm not waiting. And I was just on the road last Thursday, dealing with major incidents in Madison. So, I feel like that the people working for me would know. Kim will be one of the first people in, if not the first person in, if she's the closest. And my expectation from my people will be, if you're the closest, please go in and help those children. My gosh, right? So that was my opinion of what happened there. Just a complete and utter failure of leadership. They were looking for a decision to be made for them. It sounds like that department was not functioning as it should be. Leaders should be empowering your people to make those tough decisions on their own and feel like they could trust that you will back them up when they make those decisions, and I will back my people.
And because school safety is so important and on everybody's minds, there's also the idea of arming teachers. And I just want to get your take on that, of arming teachers with this help. Would just having more guns be a problem, or for your role as sheriff? So what do you feel? How do you feel about arming teachers?
Right. So as I expressed earlier here too, I think it's really up to each district, right? If you have a district that's really going to be training your teachers to an extremely high level where they can be safe with a weapon, in a locker, I've seen locked lockers in the hallway that are locked, or in the classroom. I think it's possible. I think Israel is a good example of that. Like, they had many terrorist activities, and now those schools are no longer a soft target because of their actions. However, as a person in law enforcement, I have a very high expectation of what that training would be, and I would be working very hard with those school districts should they decide to go down that road to make sure that those teachers are ready for that. And if they aren't ready for that, then we'll be working for some other solution to happen.
Okay, Nicole?
I feel that a lot of times in our school districts, you have people that retire from law enforcement or leave law enforcement for teaching. Maybe we can work with these people that leave our law enforcement to keep up their credentials, maybe having those people armed. But I agree, we have to have a lot of training for our teachers, because they can be put in a very bad position if they aren't within their school district. And we have to go through a lot of training. And when there is a risk involved and it is time to act, are they going to be able to consciously act?
Thank you. Michael, what gun control laws would you favor to make your job safer and easier?
I'm not in favor of too many gun control laws. I think we need to continue to work with our mental health system to make sure that the people that have access to guns are in the right mindset to have those weapons. And I'll just add to it, and the people that are given these weapons also need to be held accountable. We've had instances where the person is suffering from severe mental illness, and parents will buy them their guns to get around stuff. And then, unfortunately, we have issues at that point.
Thank you. And Kim, what gun control laws would you favor to make your job safer and easier?
So the laws currently on the books are actually quite good. And if we were actually enforcing those laws as we should be, I think we wouldn't have as many troubles as we're having right now, including our Chapter 51 statutes here in the state, which is our emergency detention for mental health. We need to have those enforced. People, when they raise their hand and say, hey, my relative or friend is struggling right now, can you come help me? We need to know that those people on their 48-hour hold are being actually assessed to make sure they're ready to come back into our community before they're brought back. I saw, in Dane County, that was not occurring. I had people, when I worked as a neighborhood officer, is a great example. I mean, my residents were begging me, Kim, they take me back to the hospital, and I'm like, you just came from the hospital. I mean, what can I do? And it's very unfortunate. Our laws, when you hear about these failures where people are like, oh, they got a hold of this gun, and then whatever happened, and it's always like, their background check machine was down, or, you know, their friend, you know, was doing something illegal already. So a lot of this stuff is just people being careless and not respecting firearms for the tools that they are. They can be very dangerous, just as many other things in our environment can be. But with special regard, people need to be educating their children, their family members. Hey, this is not a toy. This is not to be touched unless an adult is around, and especially not in the wrong state of mind. So I think I would stick with what we have now and be enforcing what we have now.
Thank you. This next question is kind of about diversity in training. How will you ensure that deputies keep personal biases out of their decision-making processes while on assignments with peoples of various backgrounds in terms of race, gender, religion, political leanings? Kim, you can start, please.
So there's a lot of attention right now being given to implicit bias in policing. And it actually is all across, you know, all human beings have this bias. So they're finding it in the medical field, you know, people of color are not being treated properly by doctors. So it's really important to acknowledge that human beings have bias. And if you're working in a neighborhood that has a certain race of people, a certain economic status of people, after you've been assaulted or battered as an officer, you have to be honest with yourself and say, you know what? I've really got a chip on my shoulder at this point. I need a break, or I need to start, you know, having positive contacts with that same community so it evens out a little bit. I think there's also been a lot of bad incentives for officers to, let's say, enforce over and over, like vehicle maintenance laws as a great example, that disparatively impact certain groups of our communities. And at the end of the day, you want community trust. That's the people that are going to come to you and tell you, hey, this guy isn't right. I think he's going to hurt the school. Or that's my friend's sister, and she's not doing okay. And so by hammering people over and over on like taillights, it just poisons that whole community, you know, environment. And I think that that's one thing that, you know, as a sheriff's office, you have to show the way. Like, this is how we find drug dealers. This is how we find, you know, people who are violent, not necessarily by hammering every single person in this particular neighborhood.
Excellent, thank you. And Michael?
One thing I like to do is go back to that monthly training, is at equity and inclusion training. That is something that's very important to law enforcement. I know that we do it on the treatment court end. Every year we're required to do it. You always learn something. Two is holding our team accountable. If we have any type of allegations or something, have a committee set aside that, hey, this team will go in and investigate it, review the documents, review the body cams, etc., to see if we have an issue and how we're going to address it.
Excellent, thank you. Under your leadership, what will be the department's policy in regards to rallies, protests, demonstrations that may take place in Iowa County? How will you ensure that the public is safe, but lawful assembly is allowed? I'll start with you, Michael.
We had an incident down at the courthouse here a couple years ago. There's no issues with the freedom of speech, the right to gather, etc. But where we have issues is when it starts to turn violent and we start having property damage. We had teams hidden around Dodgeville to act if anything was to go down. Positive communication with the people that were putting on the protest, and we were able to go through with no incidents at all. And I'd like to continue that philosophy. We'll meet together and we'll come up with a plan, and we'll just be in the backgrounds. Allow it to happen, but we're not going to allow any damage, any type of violence.
Excellent, thank you. And Kim?
So you may have heard in Madison that we had a couple riots. So we had about 100 days straight where I was on strike teams helping officers deal with these folks that were coming to a lot of times vent frustration, other times trying to light things on fire and hurt the community. A lot of that community was people of color and small family businesses. It was really hard to watch, but we did learn a lot from 100 days straight of that. Number one was mobility, not to set up a line of officers like a militaristic, you know, British line walking. It just creates a target that they like to bait people into, you know, yelling at them or baton, whatever. So being quicker about how we grab up the people who are being violent or being destructive of our, let's say, our historic courthouse is being, you know, damaged, grabbing those people up quickly, getting them out before people have time to en masse around us, and then start hurting our officers. So big deal that we learned from that was mobility. I think our strategy had been to contact the leadership as soon as we possibly can, so there be even rumblings of any kind of protest that's going to come, to be proactive again and reach out to them and say, hey, I heard this, how can we facilitate this to happen safely? Because that is super important to me. I do want First Amendment rights to be happening here, and people to be able to vent their frustration and make people aware. This is something I'm not agreeing with, or this is something I do agree with. Whatever's going on, we want to make sure we're knowing about it, we're contacting that leadership, and we're able to move around. Another thing that I would say that we did wrong in the beginning is we used our mutual aid badly. We had a really great response from Iowa County and Dane County those first couple nights, and we did not trust them to do the job that needed to be done to protect the city. I learned a lot watching that. I think we saw in Kenosha a very different sequence of events where they addressed it right away. They trusted their partners from other counties and other communities that came in to help them, and they were able to address that violence and nip it in the bud right away. So that would be my tactic going in, is mobility, contacting the leaders, and making sure you use that mutual aid right away to send a message that Iowa County is not to be destroyed, that it's for venting your frustrations, but not violence.
You're getting a little violent.
Sorry about that, yeah.
Okay, that concludes the question part from the Iowa County Elections Education Team. Do we have any cards we don't have any cards? Oh,
There's one.
I see one.
One on the aisle. There we go.
Maybe Alan can grab that,
I can get it now.
or Tony. Oh, we have another card, too.
Great.
Oh, I'm seeing more cards, or people are just While Alan's reading those and seeing if they're... I just want to thank everybody. I want to thank you very much for participating in this. And I want to thank Sheriff Mitchek for participating. We're just really grateful for you to appear at this, because it's good to know. I mean, it's hard to find out information about candidates. And you can't really, I don't know if you're running TV ads, because I don't watch television, but TV ads can sometimes be
They're pretty expensive. Yeah.
They're expensive, yeah, right. I want to thank Dodgeville High School also for sharing this space with us, which is such an amazing place. And I want to thank our team, our Iowa County Fair Maps team, now known as the Iowa County Elections Team. And our goal is our Elections Education Team. Our goal is to inform Iowa County residents of these important election issues in a nonpartisan way. If you're interested in joining, please contact iowacountyelections@gmail.com. We welcome all interested people, and we're considering other future forums on things like ranked choice voting and explaining the court system, and we're always looking for ideas. So please, there's a sign-up sheet that's been going around. You can sign up, and Alan has some more questions.
I think a lot of these have been answered. You can see if they want to add anything.
Okay, all right. Oh, yeah. I hope I can read this. I'm not. Where are we at? Let's see, I think we're back to you as the first one.
That's fine.
Yes. What resources do you think need to be provided to adequately address policing in regarding to mental health and drug overdose?
So, drug overdose, the best resource that seems to work is with distributing Narcan throughout the community. This community just lost a young mother to overdose this last week, and that was extremely hard. And I was at the family mourning in Arena. It was awful. Had we had somebody nearby with some Narcan or naloxone as the generic, that would be ideal. It would be incredible to have more of that. It would be better to have some of that shame and stigma be taken off of these people who often were led into this addiction by a sports injury or some twisted knee or whatever, and then they end up in this situation where they're hankering for some drug. And we need to pull that shame and stigma away and make sure people know it is okay to come and ask for help. And I hope that the Sheriff's Office will be a place that they can call or come to ask for that help. And was the second part mental health?
Just policing in regards to mental health and drug overdose.
Okay. So the mental health system, we actually have sued the state because the mental health system is in kind of a strange place right now. Ideally, we'd have a mental health system that was, like I mentioned earlier, properly evaluating people, supporting them, even after these 48-hour detentions. Ideally, we'd like to see a behavioral or mental health treatment facility near to Iowa County or in Iowa County, but it's a lot of money and a lot of liability, so we understand why that's not happening. But honestly, if we could get resources like that here, I think that would make a big difference. When Meritor opened up their juvenile behavioral health center in Madison, that made a big difference for our officers that were dealing with juveniles. And so even nearby locations like that can make a big difference. So.
And Michael, what resources do you think need to be provided to adequately address policing in regards to mental health and drug overdose?
We've taken drastic steps already. The Narcan in our squads, our team has multiple saves already from responding to opiate overdoses. One thing that we have up and running now is Narcan upon release. Inmates have the option to watch a training video, and when they leave, they can get Narcan when they walk out the door. Phenomenal program. One is, in the county, we have so many different groups doing so many different things. We need to come together and do one thing to all be on the same page. Mental health right now has different mental health coalitions. There's substance abuse prevention. But realistically, a lot of that comes together, and we need to be able to figure out what resources we have in our county already. Use those resources, but not only just our county, but what's Grant County using, what's Lafayette County using that we don't have already? Can we piggyback off from each other? And all that needs to be tied back into our law enforcement training, making sure that they know what the resources are. One of the things I absolutely hate is when I am dealing with someone on the treatment court end or in our facility say, you know what, Mike, I asked for help from a police officer. Last month I ended up overdosing. That should not happen. Our officers need to have the resources in their squad cars in order to direct them to the proper channelization, whether it's Unified, Uplands, peer support, anything to help them get on the right track for their addiction or mental health issues.
Well, that's a great way to the last question. It's a good segue because it says, what improvements can be made with your department and lines of communication? And I would say lines of communication within the department and outside with partnering organizations.
So whenever a deputy or comes across even our dispatch center of an overdose, we need to be making sure that there's follow-up with our Unified peer support, making sure that they've been notified of this person. One thing that we have done in the jail is exactly that. We had so many different avenues trying to provide treatment to all these inmates, but realistically it was taking a lot of our team's time up. So every Monday morning, 10 o'clock, I said, let's come to the table, let's meet. So we meet every morning at 10 o'clock to see what each entity is doing for an inmate so we can continue that care. And I don't like to use the word waste time, but we can track the time of our team somewhere else while I sit on that committee and we figure out what's the best avenues for this person when they get released so we don't have overdose, we don't have mental health crisis, etc.
And Kim, what improvements can be made? Well, with your department, the line of communications, how do you, within the department and outside with partnering organizations?
So I think that one thing I haven't seen this Sheriff's Office do is an annual report. I would really like to see that become a part of an annual thing for this department. I think it would really help the community understand what we do and how we do it, and to see visually in that report, pictures of our officers with those partnerships going on, pictures of them all in the community. I think that makes a big difference, and every department I've worked for, with the exception of one, did that. I think it was extremely helpful, and it also kind of laid the groundwork for where our area of responsibility stopped and these other partnering organizations began. It also was good for, like examples, urban ministry in Madison. They would help folks coming out of the jail to get jobs and get housing and whatnot. It was good for people to see us partnering together with those people, to see that it's not animosity whatsoever. You've served your time. Let's move on and get you thriving out in our county. I'd really like to see more collaborative type efforts where it's not a separate website for everything. It'd be nice to see it all coming together on Iowa County's website where we could just say, yep, our drug treatment court is on the same page as our Iowa County Sheriff's Office, so they understand it's something we do and we offer here. So those community partnerships being linked right in together, I think would be important for people to see as they become more and more onto the social media and onto the internet type resources. So those would be big things I'd like to see. I'd just love to see us out in the community more talking about what we do. I think that's really important. I thought the presentation tonight was great by Sheriff Mitchell, and I hope we continue that.
Okay, and now we'll go to the closing statements, and, oh, we have another question.
Good.
We have another question. Oh, we do.
We have a couple.
Wow, okay. All right, so we're on. Okay, let's start with this one. And Kim, this goes to you. Who in the Sheriff's Department is responsible for long-range planning and applying for grants, etc.?
So it could be the sheriff, could be the chief deputy sheriff, depending upon how you want to split up responsibilities. I have grant writing experience, so I could certainly help. When I was a neighborhood officer, I won several grants from the city of Madison and other organizations to help support our community policing efforts. So luckily, I've had a lot of experience with that. I actually share an office wall right now with our main grant writer, so I get some inside tracks from him. But it can be divided up however you have those talents at your disposal, right? I think that it's important to make sure that those are written well, because often we're competing head-to-head with so many other organizations, and that pot is only so big. But it comes down to community partnerships too, because a lot of times you'll get grants from local businesses or organizations that you've been partnering with for a long time. You'll work together, and sure enough, now you have resources. So I think you could pretty much, as a sheriff, determine how much or how little you want to do. I would be pretty involved if it was me.
And Michael, who in the Sheriff's Department is responsible for long-range planning and applying for grants?
Ultimately, it's the sheriff. Like Sheriff Mitchell's philosophy, he brings myself, the chief deputy, and him to the table. We plan. What do we need? He knows that I know the jail division pretty well. What am I going to need in the jail for our team in the future, etc. So it's going to be a team approach, but ultimately the sheriff.
Okay. This is a good follow-up, sort of. What is or should be the relationship between the jail administrator and the sheriff? We'll start with you.
It's got to be top notch. I say that to the whole you've got to have an open flow of communication. There's a lot of nights that myself, sheriff, and chief deputy are texting each other with issues going on. It's going to be the sheriff that is ultimately going to be responsible for it. So that jail administrator needs to have that open communication with the sheriff to keep everything in line.
Okay, and how would you set up the relationship between the jail administrator and the sheriff?
Have to agree, it has to be excellent. It's a very high liability area part of the sheriff's office. If you have an in-custody death, that's a huge deal. So, right now we're taking in inmates from all different counties that are overwhelmed at their jails. And luckily we've been able, it sounds like from my committee work, to send back some of the more violent folks or people that cannot seem to get with the program. So having an open communication with your administrator that's in charge of that jail is essential. I would say other than the canine unit, which we don't have right now, staffed, I think it's one of the highest liability areas you're going to have. So I think it's very important. I think you have to have somebody who's on their game and knows what they're doing and understands where the laws fall as far as where your staff needs to be doing on what timeline and how to care for these folks that are literally your responsibility until they've served their time.
Here's one about schools again, because I think schools are pretty important to everybody here. How would you, as sheriff, work with the many Iowa County school districts? So we'll start with you, Kim. How would you work with the Iowa County school districts?
So I've already tried to meet with every police chief that was in a school district in the county. It's so crucial. It's why I got into this race, honestly, was I wanted to make sure that we had a sheriff that had supervisory road experience, had a lot of repetitions in these high stress stress inoculating call is what we call it, when you're under stress and you just learn to cope with it and you can handle it and keep making decisions so you don't freeze up like a Uvalde. It's so important. And you need to have that in a sheriff, and you need somebody who's frankly willing to go out there and say, what is your plan? And if they don't have a plan, to be like, hey, let's keep working on the plan. Because as an example, when I was a neighborhood officer, we had a tabletop with Madison West, and at that point, they had no evacuation point for basically a city of children. And we just sat at that table just blown away that nobody did, number one, ever asked that question, and number two, that the school hadn't already thought of it. So you can't just assume that people have the time or the resources to do this kind of planning. Luckily in Iowa County, we have Keith Hurlbert, who is amazing as an emergency management planner. He just is really on it. So I would be partnering a lot with him and working with these school districts, and like I said, making sure, trust but verify, right? Making sure that there is a plan, that those folks, when they're under stress, they have just an automatic thing that they're able to do and know that they can get those the students married up with their parents as soon as possible, and obviously make them safe until law enforcement can take care of that threat.
Okay. And Michael, how will you, or you may already be working with the Iowa County school districts, but how would you as sheriff?
A lot of our school districts we do already have good communication with. Can be better. Communication can always be better. One thing that we're looking at right now is parent deputies with municipal law enforcement officers. And if they don't have a municipal law enforcement officer, maybe the village clerk, etc., just open up the communication with the sheriff's office. We will also need to utilize those type of communications to get into our schools, to work with the superintendents, etc. Right now, we're very lucky with the Mental Health Coalition that a lot of our school counselors are involved with that, so we already kind of have a gateway into that communication.
Okay. And here's another, we'll just do these last two. Would you be in favor of requiring gun safety training prior to the purchase of firearms? I'll start with you. Would you be in favor of requiring gun safety training prior to the purchase of a firearm?
No. I think that obviously it's the right for people to own firearms. And I think that we have a pretty good system already with hunter safety, etc., for kids who go out into the woods. So at this time, no.
Okay. Would you be in favor of requiring gun safety training prior to the purchase of a firearm?
Right. So it sounds like you would need more information. So the way that laws are written is really important. Sometimes people write laws that can be abused very easily to take away people's constitutional rights. So I would be very interested in reading that law, should it be proposed, to see what exactly they meant by training, what they meant by, what they wanted people to show that training actually was taken seat in, people's minds. That's very different from, just show them a PowerPoint and then they must be good, right? So I think, the evidence in the laws that have been passed in the United States, we've had a lot of, active shooting stuff happening in, places where they have very strict gun laws. So it's not exactly working how they intended. And I would say that at this point, I would have to, get a little bit more information, and I would be very hesitant because we do have, our Second Amendment is very clear that people do have a right to bear arms.
Okay, and we have one final question, and it really is for you, but I'm going to have you answer as well. We're not getting off easy. For Kim, it says, you indicate that you would make Iowa County a Second Amendment sanctuary. Please explain. If a red flag law is passed, will you enforce it?
So some places have talked very strongly about having red flag laws. And so far from what I've seen about these laws is that they're kind of duplicating what's already happening, and they're often with less due process for people than what we already had in place. So that's why I've been very open on my website and been very open with people in meetings that I would be very much in support at this point, at least, making Iowa County a Second Amendment sanctuary county, because it's very clear in the Constitution. It's been upheld by the Supreme Court over and over that that is a right. So yeah, at this point, I think those red flag laws don't accomplish what I think people want them to. I think they'd be much better off investing in our, Chapter 51 and many of the mental health things we mentioned here tonight, and actually enforcing those laws that are already there and already have really good due process attached to them.
Okay, Michael.
I'm not a fan of red flag laws. many reasons why that is not supported on the Badger Sheriff's level. Sanctuary County, I really don't see a reason why to go forth with that when we can invest my time with so many other things with mental health, etc. Our Chapter 51 laws, those need a lot of work also. There's a lot of times where we'll take someone to Winnebago or to another facility and they almost beat our officers back. It needs a lot of work.
Okay, that is the end of the question period. Now we are going to move to the closing statements, and we'll start with you, and
Sorry.
2 minutes.
For many decades now, Iowa County has had dedicated sheriffs that have not only served Iowa County well, but have carried the tradition of protecting and serving the people of Iowa County. While doing this, they have built a trusting relationship with the public that we are lucky to still have today, even though many law enforcement agencies across the nation struggle with this issue. If elected as your next sheriff, I will ensure you that we'll keep on building that trust, continuing working with you, and building the stakeholders of our county to get the resources that we need to keep the tradition of keeping Iowa County a safe place to visit, work, and live. I want to thank the planning committee for this event, for all the work that you have put into this, the Dodgeville School District for allowing us to use this venue, and finally to you, the voters, taking up this election as an important election.
Thank you. Kim.
So again, my name is Kim Allen. I've lived in this county for more than a decade now on a farm between Barneveld and Ridgway. My kids go to Barneveld School, and they love it there. I'm a current county board member. I think that the board knows me. They know I make strong arguments for things that matter to the voters in this county. I also stand up for the employees in this county when they are being undervalued. I know how to help the board understand the importance of the Sheriff's Office initiatives going forward. As I mentioned earlier, I'm a pretty experienced grant writer and writer in general. I know how to communicate with people. So much fear and uncertainty comes from residents not understanding what is happening in their community, and I can help with that. I have more than 20 commendations and received several awards for leadership, problem solving, and community policing. My commendations include everything from trainings I've taught as a firearms instructor to tactical rescues to PR type events with the community. I'm prepared to do this job. It's likely whatever comes at me at this point in my career won't be the first time or even the 5th. I know what needs to be done, and I can use my broad experience to benefit this county. I will not force you to walk into my office for help. I will meet you, your family, your friends where you are at, because that's what community partnership is. I am not too proud to meet in a trailer park or a back alley if it helps keep our kids safer in this county. I have shown that during this campaign, and I want to work for this entire county. If we ignore any part of it, we leave it vulnerable to those trying to predate and have negative influences on our small towns. I'd like to thank Steve Mitchick for his many years of service to Iowa County, and to thank Myron Lowe and Claudia Luz, and I'm sure many others, for organizing this forum. I do not take this opportunity lightly, and that leads me to my final point. I want to thank the many supporters from both political parties who have supported my campaign. I hope this winter Iowa County makes history by electing our first female, first mom, and first independent candidate for sheriff. So again, my name is Kimberly Allen. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming.